welcome in. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. My name is Dr. Erica Steele, and today we're going to be discussing holistic heart health. Let me see. Just give me a moment. There we go. Hello. How is everyone doing? Let me see if I can work on this really quick. If you just give me a moment. Okay, that's right. All right, perfect. All right, my name is Dr. Erica Steele. I'm a holistic doctor in family practice. I hold 7 degrees in my field. They're all in the natural healthcare space. I like to say that I went to school so you don't have to. So we are talking about holistic heart health today. And so I will have a webinar on Thursday, a longer webinar that will go over deeper information about heart health. We'll look at, we'll first kind of start about how conventional healthcare views the heart and various different, we'll focus on hypertension, but we'll definitely look at various different components of the heart when we're looking at health. We'll look at the some of the top medications that they use, but we'll look at the nutrient deficiencies that they create. So that information is not widely known about the deficiencies that pharmaceuticals actually generate to the system, like CoQ10, for instance. CoQ10 is a network antioxidant that the heart needs, and a lot of different pharmaceuticals can block that key nutrient from getting into the heart, which can be, harmful and put you at risk. So going to give you that information. We'll also review testing strategies, different things to look for, different things to ask your doctor for, that kind of thing. Again, conventional doctors are not trained like I am, so you'll see a huge, huge variation in, perhaps what you're getting. Some cardiologists, I will say, out of all of the professions, I would say cardiology, they tend to, reach for more lifestyle interventions and reach for non-pharmacological ones. And so they're definitely very compatible when we look at integrative medicine, integrative care. So we'll look at that, and we'll also look at some strategies, but we'll look at the holistic component too. So naturally, we'll talk about which metrics we would want to track at home to be able to really see if we have any kind of blood pressure issues or viscosity issues or things that we need to look at. So I'll teach you how to do that. There'll be a companion app for that. So we'll get into it more deeply on Thursday. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware and kind of come on and do a little mini talk about, the heart from a holistic perspective. So when we look at the heart, we also look at matters of the heart, right? So when we're looking at physical manifestations of disease, which is what that is, right? We also have to take into consideration mental and emotional aspects that have that interplay. And why do we do that? Because when we're looking at shifting a habit or we're looking at shifting a lifestyle pattern, it first has to be a choice, right? A decision. And so, in holistic medicine, we're really big on patient autonomy and informed decisions and really you being self-reliant. And it's not about, coercion or force or anything. It's more about education. And then through education, hopefully you become inspired to make a change. One day, you never know, something will click in your head and you're like, you know what, this is it. And so hopefully that's before kind of that, what do they say? The staying the same has to be greater than the pain of change. Hopefully, we don't have to create suffering for ourselves. Suffering is optional, by the way. And so we don't have to take on suffering. We can actually choose a different story, a different path. We can choose connection. We can choose love. We can choose really anything that we want. So I do teach a morning flow class, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, if you want to start your day with intention. And so it's a good way to begin begin that process of recreating your mind, right? Because you have aspects of your mind. If you look on my YouTube channel, I have whole trainings on the mind and the subconscious mind. I'll organize them a little bit. They're probably all over the place. But when we're looking at the mind and we're looking at making choices, right, we look at the primitive aspect of our mind. And so the primitive aspect really has those two motivations, love or fear, quite frankly, right? So if there's, let's say, a fear, right, of, let's say, not getting nurturance, right, like a mother hunger, like Kelly McDaniel's work, then there is going to be this direct pull to eating things that are going to provide comfort, that are going to provide some sort of perceived nourishment. So I found that a lot when I would eat all my calories because I was tracking. So I'd eat all my calories, all my macros, everything. And I actually felt satisfied and everything, was good. But then I would find that I would literally wake up almost in the dead of night and, be craving food. And it was interesting. I didn't quite understand it. And what I had reduced it down to when I did a lot of deconstruction was matters to the heart, that lack of nurturance and emotional starvation. And so even though I've never had a per se, a physiological heart condition like heart attack or stroke or anything like that, definitely a lot of grief and difficulty and pain on the heart. And so again, if we don't deal with these emotional woundings or really even deal with our mindset around our health and our body, because it's not just about ignoring our body, self-abandoning, or really just not paying attention or giving our power away. There's a lot of that going on in terms of we wanting the system itself to take care of us, and the system is flawed and unfortunately has a lot of concerns with it, just from its inception with Rockefeller all the way up to today. Definitely, you have to be well informed, well educated, and well advocated when you go into the healthcare system. Otherwise, unfortunately, you'll either be subjected to things you don't want to be subjected to, or just put through a lot of unnecessary hardship. Now, not to say that there's not great situations and great providers and great systems out there. I'm sure they are somewhere, right? However, we've come very far from that, mom and pop practice, where we really knew and really watched, people grow, and there was definitely more emphasis on natural healing and natural practices, and once that medical monopoly kind of took over, unfortunately, we have a very heavy pharmaceutically driven and heavy surgically driven medical industry, especially when we're looking at the heart and we're looking at how we address the heart. So remember, in holistic medicine, we first start off with just our foundationals. So what are our foundational health pieces? That's going to be, our water, our food, our movement, just our basics, just to make sure that we're getting through our day. Half our body weight in ounces in water, and we want to ensure that we're eating adequate amounts of protein. Why protein? Because it helps our body to repair and heal. There's all different types of proteins, whether you decide to use plant-based protein sources like lentils or chickpeas or that sort of thing, or you use more fish-based, like all kinds of different fish. I typically will recommend more of your lean fishes, like your whitefish, cod, halibut, mahi, that kind of thing. Not that you can't do a salmon, but the fat is kind of high in salmon, which can slow you down metabolically. If your energy level, meaning if you're not exercising to burn that off, you're just going to be pretty much sitting with it around your midsection. So it's really just a matter of, like they say, energy in, energy out. So it really depends on your, physical workload. But also, too, if you have a lot of grief and heaviness, the tendency to eat a lot of foods with a lot of fats. And I found this interesting, too, that people with ancestry that went through famines and things like that, when we would drop their fat to, ranges, because we would monitor and track these things, there would be huge kind of emotional reactions, almost to the point that we were like starving, taking, people's food away. And, there was a lot of mental and emotional anguish that really went on with those patients that had that ancestry. And so Naturally, that's going to be more of like your potato famines, Irish, that sort of thing. And so it was really fascinating. It doesn't have to be, it could also be abject poverty. Definitely within the Black community, there's lots of food deserts and things like that. Indigenous communities, especially being kind of reclused, onto reservations. There's definitely food scarcity really throughout. And so unfortunately, I had these particular patients' genetic information, and so we could make direct ties back. So this was a specific case that I worked on. And so it's really interesting to be when we begin to take all of these boxes away from, how we view the body and how we view health, because the germ theory is a box, right? It's very simple. It's like all diseases cause from these simple things, right? It's only, if there's bacterium or viruses that are lurking around, microbes that are lurking around beyond our control, and then genetics, and then it just happens spontaneously. And, there's a lot of excuses, but not a lot of real science. And that was always my challenge with the conventional healthcare system, being a little girl growing up around so much science, and also growing up around, all of these natural, holistic, Afro-Indigenous practices was just amazing. And so being able to combine the two has just been like, wow, mind-blowing, because there is so much scientific validity and ability to prove what we do, consistently. It's just, unfortunately, because of the suppressions and the medical monopoly, it has created a lot of, injustice in terms of us really receiving information, which is why us taking our own personal information is key. And so to ensure that, we have unbiased information. Hey, Cosmic Sunflower, unbiased information. And there are so many biases that exist, with our world, unfortunately. And we'll get into those this week, actually. If you're in Intro to Holistic Medicine, this week we do talk about biases, and we talk about things like, we've talked about it before, superiority bias, right? Where inherently, because of the conventional healthcare system, is deemed as superior to, more of our natural practices that are then deemed as unscientific or barbaric. These are all these conversations that have really been, ingrained and embedded in all of us. Then there's confirmation bias. And so that's kind of this other, component that exists a lot in the conventional medical system where, we already know what we know, right? And we lose the ability to question, we lose the ability to challenge, we lose that critical thinking. And instead, there's another bias that happens where there's a solution bias that we'll talk into, where it's just this kind of one-size-fit-all approach. And when you take a very one-size-fit-all approach, it can be very dangerous, especially because humans are deeply nuanced. We'll see also as we kind of get into conversations this week about subjective data, and really building that awareness. So many of us are just disconnected, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, all of the above, and so really beginning to reconnect and come back to center, so we can do kind of this personal inventory and personal audit. In fact, if you register for my holistic hypertension course on Thursday, and it's just a one-day, one and done. It's not a 12-week like my intro to holistic medicine. If you register for that, you actually get a checklist, that goes over the different areas of your body, and or not just your body, right? It goes over all aspects of you as a human being. I think of it as almost like a body, but we look at the, physical aspects, and there's some checklist items, some things you may not have thought about, or your environment. Again, some things you may not have thought about or checked on that, could be helpful, mental, emotional, spiritual, ancestral. I've kind of listed it out, just some little, housekeeping, like, hey, have you thought about some things you can kind of put into, your quarterly plans or your 12-week plans or whatever you do. So I try to really teach people to be very structured with their time and very structured, mentally and emotionally. What it does is it actually helps the nervous system when you keep a consistent schedule, because then your nervous system kind of knows what to expect. So it doesn't always have to be like that. Sometimes you do need to break free from, all of the monotony and, live in an ebb and a flow. And that's, again, why I teach morning flow, because it's a great way to really just be embodied and be, empowered throughout your day and not feel restricted and, feel like, oh, panicked and I've got to do this and I got to do that and I got to run here and I got to run there. And, really just cutting all of that adrenaline out of the system so that you can think and be creative. And so, when we're looking at, again, the mind and how it plays in, so that primitive mind, which is regulated by fear, is deeply going to be connected to the heart. So you're going to have your heart pumping, racing, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, glutathione, but also too, you're going to be eating up tons of minerals and vitamin C. So if you're always in that fight or flight mode, you're going to be depleting minerals, and our heart actually needs those minerals. So that sodium potassium pump is super critical. And when we go nutrient deficient, specifically something like magnesium or even potassium, we can have a lot of kind of heart, like symptoms and think that it's something maybe a little bit bigger. We maybe go into a conventional doctor and they look at everything, the labs look normal, we get dismissed and we're frustrated, but it's still going on. So now it starts to play on our minds. Now we're thinking the absolute worst, and WebMD does not help things. And so I just wanted to also kind of cut some of that and teach you just simple dehydration. I once had this patient who, bless his heart, is an older man, and we would go through this pretty much periodically, where he would forget to drink, his minimum of half of his body weight in ounces in water, and this dehydration would set in, and he would get depleted, dehydrated, and then he would start having these heart palpitations, and he'd call me in this panic, and oh my God, Dr. Steele, what's happening to me? And I'd have to soothe him down, and he's like, he's having a heart, he's going to the absolute jumping to conclusions. And so calming down, let's go to a process, right? Let's start at the beginning. Hey, Bubba, let's start at the beginning. Let's work on, maybe how much, water have you drank today? How much, have you done any breath work? What's your heart rate look like, today? So just those simple things, to slow people down, because really we're conditioned, unfortunately, with all of that bias to be extremely reactive. So we're trained and all conditioned, right, in a colonized healthcare system to ignore, because also too, even when we go in and we're asking, we're not getting any information. So if we're not getting any information and being dismissed and tossed around, from provider to provider, it really can be extremely frustrating, demoralizing, all of the things. Oh, you're so welcome, Cosmic Sunflower. Yes, indeed. I absolutely love teaching and sharing and all the things. So definitely, it is my pleasure and honor. Again, I went to school, so you don't have to, you can go to school, and I encourage everyone to go to school, indeed. My thing is with school and education, really be mindful of what you are aligning yourself with, and make sure that it's something that 10 toes down you were about. And so just because things get really tricky, lines get drawn, and for me, doing harm was absolutely not, I did not want to do any harm. And so unconscious or conscious, and so I really approached healthcare and healing from that perspective, which is why you'll see I take so much data, right? And the reason I take so much data on my patients is not to just wear them out with all this stuff, but and also too, I will suggest that because I've learned all of this stuff and because I've done all these dynamics, I've also figured out really simplistic ways to handle things. And so because what I found is the more data I had, the more I could personalize, the more I could isolate, but the more I could see patterns. And so beginning to see patterns, with over 40,000 patients that I've treated, really has given me a really profound awareness, but also an appreciation of just how the body works and how it heals and how it does all these things. So we'll get into, again, that kind of primitive aspect with all those minerals, etc. And then we'll also look at the subconscious. So the role that, unprocessed emotions or grief, weigh heaviness on the heart, or even imbalances in kind of that masculine, feminine, that giving and that receiving. If you are an overgiver or you are an under receiver, like the imbalances that happen with the heart because there is a strain, right? Or even perfectionism. Believe it or not, there are research studies out there that suggest that the more someone is kind of in judgment of self or picking oneself apart, almost like in an autoimmune situation, they put that perfection on their heart because they're putting that pressure of having to be perfect, of having to do everything right, which unfortunately is a trauma response. And so if you had, I call them, reality makers, not in the words of, what is her name? I can't remember, the Kundalini lady. Anyway, your parental figures, if you had a parental figure, or even, if you had a partner or a spouse or something like that, where, you were kind of tiptoeing around them, or you had to kind of mind your P's and Q's. Otherwise there was some sort of, retaliation or some sort of, back and forth, some sort of power struggle. What can happen is that then again, we're super, super tense all the time. That heart, that nervous system, that grief, and also too, where we have difficulty receiving because that fear, if I allow someone in, right? And so we put up these heart walls, right? As a response to protect ourselves emotionally if we've had deep emotional wounds. And that all plays into, the heart and healing the heart. I've worked with people as well who, lost, their partners after, all of these years, and the heaviness and the grief. And there is a reason why a lot of times after a partner leaves, you go with them because, there is, especially if there's a soul tie and a soul connection. I had to do, believe it or not, I feel like I've lived 20 lives, but I had to do a soul retrieval for a partner when I lost a partner in 2016. That was just absolutely devastating. And I had to actually go retrieve, literally, with a Peruvian shaman, a part of my soul back. And so these grieves, really impact us and really affect us in a deep way that just really aren't seen, heard, or even appreciated in the conventional healthcare model. So it's not a wonder why people are not getting the care that they need, because there's a serious gap in really what's needed. That's why I wrote the column, or have the column, Bring Care Back to Healthcare, because it is about, bringing humanity back to healthcare. I know everybody wants universal healthcare, and while I think the idea of everyone getting healthcare is good, I think we have to really be honest with ourselves that our current healthcare system is not a healthcare system. It is a sick care, profit-centered system, and so we need reform. However, where do you even begin, with reforming that monstrous system? For me, my focus is really working with the people. I've always been kind of the people's doctor, because you need information, especially as we're going through health blackouts. We need more information so that you can be prepared and you know what to do sooner, right? And that's the advantage of understanding these things, is you being able to be in the driver's seat instead of being in the passenger seat, or God forbid, the trunk. Some people are really like, they're just like, whatever my doctor says, not fact checking, not asking questions, and being this passive vessel. And that can be extremely dangerous. So as an example, I had a patient that I worked with many, many years ago, an elderly woman, and she came in and she was on like 4 or 5 different hypertensive medications, and her hypertension was still, her blood pressure was still out of control, right? And so, the doctors had just kind of kept piling on the dose, and then trying different ones, and, nothing seemed to work. And so she was in my office concerned, and her numbers were really high. Like, they weren't even like, for that much medication, wow. And And so nobody had asked her about her water, her diet, her stress, none of that. And so, it wasn't easy, but, we worked on it step by step, and, we got the water in and the hydration, and we got the minerals in. And then, we had our scuffles about food, because we are human, right? And we do like what we like. And so we do have to work with that. And I tend to use positive psychology instead of negative psychology, because it just doesn't work when you tell people what to do. And also in motivational interviewing, we really don't tell what people to do, because we don't want to create that same coercive control, and we don't want to create that same type of disempowerment. We actually want to create the opposite. We want our patients to be autonomous. We want our patients to, be proactive. We want them to be involved in their care. We want them to actually learn how their bodies work. Imagine that, instead of keep coming back to us to be able to manage. It is a joy when I can retire a patient out, and I've had patients for many, many years, 10, 15 years, but I've also had patients as well, who will come to my practice for a period of time to get some support and then off to the races, but they keep in touch, and, they still follow my work or whatever. And so, over this course of time, I've been able to build this, large collection of information. Again, going to school for as long as I have, I've really been able to acquire a lot of knowledge and access to information that you wouldn't otherwise gain access to. So here's my treasure chest. If you are not a part of my community, please join. It's absolutely free, and I post information in there. I haven't put my event calendar for this week yet. I will get to it. There's been so much that I've already done this morning. If you're in the Intro to Holistic Medicine class, you should have received the email with all the course load for this week, what we're working on, which book we're working through, the summary, and all of that information. So you should have that ready to go. There's still time if you want to join that course. You're more than welcome to. We're only a weekend, so you still have some time to catch up. Plus, it's self-guided, so there's really no pressure. I want to kind of make this course more of a fun course and more of an exploratory course. And then obviously those people that are professionals want to, they want to get it done and get it working and get it implemented into their practices. So there's definitely something for everyone. Also, all investment levels as well. I think there is definitely investments that go into, getting holistic care, but you'll find that, again, the more you know, right? When I did my MPH, I really studied a lot of the systemic issues specifically tied to health insurance, and that's when I really uncovered a lot about the medical monopolies. I knew a lot about it, but I didn't really get as nitty-gritty into how the health insurance is involved, and, how legislation is involved, and all of the different, just so much. It's once you go down the rabbit hole, it's almost like you can't turn back. And so again, I'm thinking, okay, so I've got all this going on. Here's what's going on with healthcare in general. What do I do? How do we move forward, and what do we need to do in order to make that happen? And so, trying to bring, information to people that's not filtered, that's not, got all kinds of crazy, just really basic things that you can do, that really take more just time and energy and focus. And so when we look, and also too, again, we're human beings, so we have to look at ourselves from all different angles. So not just what we're doing mentally, what we're thinking to ourselves, what we're feeling, but then our actions, because our thoughts, right, whether positive or negative, create our emotions, right? And so our emotions either are going to be, are going to be triggered to be motivated or demotivated, right? And so if I'm demotivated, I'm not necessarily going to want to do anything. And so if I find myself in that position, I need to go back and check my thoughts. What am I telling myself habitually? Am I dealing with, am I in denial? Am I ignoring? Am I repressing? Am I avoiding? Or am I really actively saying to myself, okay, what can I do proactively? Because here's the deal, nobody is going to save you. I know, and I really blame Disney on this one because, I mean, look at my setup, like Disney just ruined me, because we're always looking for someone, right? Something, whether it's a government or a doctor or a name the thing, right? Some Prince Charming, somewhere, somebody, to come and save us. But we fail to look at our personal responsibility in the matter. And so if you're dealing with a health issue, right, your personal responsibility are your foundational health pieces. So what is that? Drinking half your body weight in ounces in water. If you have a cardiac condition, you really need to track your sodium. Now, unconscious and confirmation bias will click in and say, oh no, I have plenty. I never add sodium to my food. Well, guess what? There's sodium in food. And so you have to track it. There's a lot of hidden sodium. Restaurants actually sell their food with high fat, high sugar, high sodium. Very rarely are they building meals that are going to be nutritious. That's why typically when you go out to a restaurant, it's more of a treat, right? It's not necessarily something that you're doing every day. But because we're so out of balance, our minds are over here, our emotions are over here, sodium is salt. Our bodies are over here, we're going a mile a minute, okay? We're stressed out, we're watching the news, all the things, right? And we're not being really conscious and present. And now is the time we have to ground, and we have to really get focused. And so sodium, potassium are on a channel together. They're going to affect your kidneys. They're going to affect your adrenal glands, which is your stress. They're going to affect your heart. They affect so many systems because your electrolytes and your buffering systems, which is why that more alkalinity is so key, because it can really help your buffering systems and get you those key minerals, without you having to kind of stress so much. I really like coconut water. We're very fortunate, obviously, down in the islands to have, coconuts fresh. But if you're not, in that situation, you can always use, you can buy it, but also too, you can put cucumbers in water as well. They are very hydrating. To add watermelon also is super hydrating, but you want to make sure you get half your body weight in ounces in water at minimum every single day. So that's the first thing. The next thing is your protein, right? I know it sounds super basic. What are you talking about? And you have to track it. Like if you don't track it, you don't really know, right? So we talk about water, we talk about sodium because we want to flush the sodium out, right? We need to make sure that there's fluid flushing and moving throughout the system. So we make sure that is, managed and worked on properly, right? We get that buffering system, we get more alkalinity going through there, right? And then as we start to build more protein, right, it doesn't have to be animal-based proteins. We can use plant-based protein sources like our lentils, right, which are actually going to be more alkaline. Our plant-based our animal-based sources are going to be more acidic. So we're definitely going to have to manage our fiber, our short-chain fatty acids, our pre and probiotics a lot more if we're eating animal-based proteins. So my recommendation is to reduce them as much as possible and really get your proteins more through those plant-based sources, just because they're going to digest a lot easier. We weren't really made to eat, all the food, that we really consume. I mean, you look at the portions that, we eat, they're just huge. And then in comparison to the amount of physical activity that we're doing, it's just not enough. And so if you're sitting and kind of engorging yourself and eating more and more fat and you're not physically working out, you're just building all around the midsection and, putting yourself at metabolic health risk. So we don't want to do that. So we start looking at things like our protein, we start tracking them, we start looking at things like our sodium, we start tracking, we look at things like our fat and we start tracking them, and we just build more and more awareness to these things. And as we build more awareness, we're going to get more motivated to change, right? So right now, a lot of people are in denial, or they're afraid, they don't want to look, they want to give their power away. They play all these games, right? But what we're really wanting to do, if you're ready to actually take back your health, right, instead of giving it away, we have to first monitor what we're doing, right? Yes, we first must have to pay attention consciously. Physician, heal thyself. So what are you doing every single day in order to build your health? Because health is a state that you have to create. And so nobody's going to create that for you. You have to create it for yourself. And so if you're dealing with a heart condition, this is what I would do. So water, sodium, protein, I'm tracking, I'm doing, right? But also my heart rate. Why my heart rate? Because of my stress, right? So if I am a perfectionist or if I'm in survival mode, number one, I have to eliminate whatever environmental stressor it is. So if it's a boss that doesn't work, I really need to, maybe I quit my job, but I definitely need to work on whatever my limiting beliefs are around this situation and try to find some, common ground between my subconscious and my subconscious. Now, of course, right? Those are a lot of times geared towards limiting beliefs. If we think, oh, we're stuck at a certain position, or we're stuck at a certain job, or in a certain relationship, those are tied to limiting beliefs and oftentimes core beliefs. Again, hidden way below the surface and something you wouldn't know in a standard 15-minute primary care office, And so you would be just absolutely just blown away at all of the different things that we hold on to as human beings, and we're not even aware. In my healing journey, I had ran across a delightful woman. I think she follows me still on social. And she did motion code work. And we worked together, I can't even remember, probably for a few months. And it was so cool because I had built so many walls of protection around my heart. I mean, I had been through so much, with my childhood, then leaving my home and going through, just really the whole Lifetime television movie. And so I had put all of these walls of protection around my heart. So naturally, if you have all of these walls of protection around your heart, you're going to be pushing people away. You're going to be sabotaging yourself. You're going to be afraid. You're not going to know your worth. You're going to be overgiving. You're going to be overcompensating, all the things and more I did, And so as a response, right, again, building up all this and then also getting into all these crazy situations. And so what I had to kind of do and what we worked on was breaking down those heart walls. And I'll tell you, it was some of the most weirdest work, and not weird in like a bad sense, but just weird in the sense like it felt weird because when I was literally doing the heart walls and working, so we would work on it and, I could feel things and, sensations and that kind of thing, because we really are not conscious about how we've stored these emotions. So I'll never forget, I had been doing a lot of work on all kinds of different things in my subconscious. I had been clearing all kinds of stuff out. And so I remember I was driving and I literally felt like chunks falling off of my heart, so much to the point that my heart felt sore, and it stayed that way, almost like it was like a scab for like several days. And it really helped me to realize, wow, not only do we put all of this junk around our hearts to protect ourselves, especially if we've lost our power or we've given our power away or it's been taken or we're not able to express and communicate ourselves, in a powerful way, our voice is shut down, all sorts of things, and that goes into the chakra system, which we'll talk about. And so that's kind of blending that Eastern and Western medicine. And so when we've gone through all of these different traumas and all of these different experiences and they impact us, most of us just tuck it away and, we compartmentalize it and we keep it moving, because most of us, unfortunately, don't have the luxury to kind of stop and, bask in our sorrow. And so, as a response, we just kind of pile things up and pile things up and pile things up. And naturally, because we're emotionally piling things up and we're not dealing with things, of course, physically and our actions, we're going to tend to eat more of the fatty foods or the sugary foods or the high sodium foods, and we're not even going to realize it consciously because our emotions are turned way up and our mind is turned way up, and we're just running on autopilot. So holistic medicine is about slowing people way down, getting you out of that reactionary fight or flight mode. It's about really living in your peace, living in your mind, living in your body, living in your spirit, because it's deeply complex. It's not just, if you're taking the Intro to Holistic Medicine classes we start building this week, it's going to start to really get more like, wow, there's a lot going on to this as we look at nutritional assessment questionnaires and we look at hidden symptoms, of nutrient deficiencies that you're not aware of, that you're not taught, that none of us are taught. And many of these nutrient deficiencies impact the heart and impact the blood sugar and impact inflammation or detox pathways and lots of different symptoms. And so when we keep going to the conventional doctor because we haven't developed a disease yet, we're not sick enough yet, they keep dismissing us, which again, it just spins us in this forever cycle and circle. So, being able to come on and educate you guys about different strategies, different testing, that we have. Like, for instance, we'll talk about the VAP test. We'll talk about, when we're looking at viscosity and pressure, we'll look at the role of like stress test and EKGs, ECGs. And these days we can actually do an ECG, EKG actually completely remote now, which is like insane. We can do it remotely anywhere in the world, record it. And it's pretty amazing. I can listen to lung sounds, listen to heart sounds, like I said, completely remote. And so virtual, sitting right here in the beautiful Caribbean, hanging out, listening to your heart and making sure that it's healthy. So, but also too, if there is some sort of, bradycardia or some sort of tachycardia, which is low, heart rates or high heart rates, then, from there, I can send that file to a cardiologist wherever you are, to make sure there's nothing structurally wrong, because we want to make sure that the heart is healthy structurally. And then as we're working on improving the function of the heart and making sure that, the heart's getting all the nutrients that it needs and also not getting involved with toxicity that it maybe not needs, right? So somebody asked, what do we do for bad cholesterol? Okay, so first things first, I educate my patients. There's a really good book. I cannot remember the name of the doctor, but it's called The Cholesterol Myth, and it talks about all the various things with statins and how statin medications came to be. And so pretty much, I'll summarize it for you. It's another pharmaceutical project, and so unfortunately, they focus on cholesterol not because it actually affects, it does affect heart, but it's not the leading driver of cardiac risk or heart disease, right? So we instead would look at your triglycerides, we're going to look at your LDLs, we're going to look at your total overall picture, your lipid panel. And again, if we need to go deeper, we would look at a VAP test, right, to look at the viscosity. So we're not just going to look at your cholesterol, but if somebody does have high cholesterol, we know a lot of times it's a fiber issue, it's a prebiotic issue, a lot of times it's a balancing between their protein and fat issue. Sometimes it can be a stomach acid issue as well. So they're not fully digesting. They can have buildup of acidity, and so that's creating a lot of the digestive process issues. They could have some enzyme deficiencies as well. So typically we see that, and so natural alternatives, right, that they usually combine or not combine, that they will typically recommend is red yeast rice. However, right, it's not just about replacing one for another. It's about understanding how the body actually works as a whole, so you're not dependent upon taking anything, right, even if it's a natural substance, right? And so, of course, there's supplements you're going to have to take, but I tend to reach for supplements as medication. I tend to reach for my food first, and then I will go for supplements and things like that to be able to help support. But that's also years and years and years of balancing and being really in terms. So in terms, again, right, it's not one thing, right? So in conventional medicine, they've trained you with confirmation bias to say, oh, bad cholesterol equals this. So if I just take this, this will fix this, right? So what did I just say? I just said triglycerides, LDLs, okay? So we don't know what your triglycerides are. We don't know what your LDLs are. We also have to look at your short chain fatty acids, your prebiotic, probiotic, your stomach acid, right? And your acidity balances. all of those things just to understand what's going on metabolically, right? If I was just a supplement salesperson or somebody who had no training, again, I would tell you, oh, go take red yeast rice, right? And then you take it and who knows what happens, right? But there's a functional issue going on. The body's communicating and telling us that something's going on. And now we have to kind of go through kind of the process of elimination to figure out what it could be, right? Because it's not just one thing. It could be any number of things, like especially if it's a stomach acid issue, not to cuss, but shit, rolls downhill. And so if it's a stomach acid issue, boy, oh boy, it's going to be acidity buildup. It's going to be prebiotic, probiotic, dysbiosis. It's going to be a mess in there. So, working through all of that step by step. And I found that you just can't uncover that in one appointment, unfortunately, with people, really working through people's, again, confirmation bias, what they already know to be true, even though I'm saying new information, you'd be shocked and surprised, and so, but being able to roll with the resistance, as we'll talk about in the Intro to Holistic Medicine class this week, as we discuss more about motivational interviewing and more about those biases as well. So there's also this authority bias as well, where, thinking that, oh, just because I'm a provider, I know everything. And in fact, I like to come from a perspective of I know nothing. And then that way I can really be open to exploring, right? What do we say in kind of the first week? What do we think? What do we know? And what can we prove? Because in healthcare in general, we're dealing with bias, right? So we put things on the court with subjective data, meaning like questionnaires that people fill out, so I can really see what their symptoms are and really understand. And they're not having to like remember it. Oh my God. People really stress going to the doctor for real. Back when I had my physical practice, I probably only wore my coat for maybe a year. People would freak out so much with the coat. So I took my coat off. And most of the time kids would wear it. And so, I took my coat off and, really just started talking to my patients and trying to understand, what their hangups were and what their challenges were, right? Because it wasn't just like, you're not going to fall out of your chair if I tell you eating fruits and vegetables is the key to good health. Like, it's not a shocker, right? However, what is driving that behavior to not continue to reach for something healthy versus something unhealthy? And we've established it's either something mental or something emotional or a combination thereof. So we work to balance both the mind as well as the emotions, and then from there the actions and the behaviors can be a little different, right? And that's what it is. It's making a different choice and making a different decision. And unfortunately, nobody can do it for you. I can coach you, I can teach you, I can show you the path, I can give you a checklist, I can do all the things, but do the work for you. And so that's where, really some patience, right? Which unfortunately, people have a lot of cardiac stuff going on. Sometimes they're not as patient because of that pressure that they put on themselves, that endless perfectionism, that is the world that they look at. Any Virgos out there, and so, putting that perfectionism on self and having that expectation, or sometimes they put it even more so on themselves than other people, and then they become devalued, right? Because now they're giving more than they're receiving, but they're doing that because of that emotional wounding, and so that all those heart walls and self-protection. So again, we play all of these games with ourselves, all these dualities with ourselves, and so when we're looking at healing ourselves, we just reductionist thinking of, oh, I'm just going to take this one supplement or take this one herb, or, like what in life is like one thing and that's it. Like everything requires like so many steps involved. I mean, just getting your driver's license to, going to school, to getting married, to, having children. Anything that is in your life requires some steps, anything worth doing anyway. And so your health is absolutely one of the most important things that you will ever have, not to dehumanize it by calling it things, but it's one of the most important vehicles that you will have in your life. And so it is drastically important that you take care of your body and you nurture it and you listen to it. We'll be talking a little bit about, how people ignore symptoms, and, we'll talk about general symptoms, peculiar symptoms. We'll talk about the role of homeopathy, because we definitely look at those kinds of things in the world of homeopathy. And so, being able to, is it a blood test you can do to be proactive? So proactive for, what are you trying to be proactive for? So that would be the question, right? So in terms of being proactive with what aspect of your health? So there's various different things. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so Cosmic said, I love how you spoke about the intersections of mental and emotional health. I was in a really toxic environment at my first job out of grad school, and the stress-induced symptoms. Absolutely. There's this dynamic between your thoughts, right? Because again, even if you feel something emotionally, it doesn't mean that your mind is ready to make the change, because your mind a lot of times is in a fear state. It's like, oh my God, but I've got this and I've got that and I've got this and I've got that. I just have to hold on in survival mode until, and so we almost always do that until. In terms of heart disease, it depends on the staging of heart disease. If you haven't had any sort of, scans in a while, I would definitely look at it. So there's structural and functional. Okay. So structural is anatomical with the heart. So structurally, right, you're going to make sure you're going to do like a stress test, maybe, do like I said, EKG, ECG, make sure that everything in the heart is good, right? So structurally, there's no, areas that maybe look weak or loss of oxygen or anything like that, right? You're moving it. And you'll know also with cardiovascular health, if you walk upstairs and you're feeling winded, just sitting and standing, those kinds of things, heaving, all of those things can really kind of be an indication that the heart is having to pump too hard. And there's not enough blood. Anemia can also drive that as well. So, making sure that you have, oxygen in, more oxygen into, your life with water. And also you can put chlorophyll and stuff in your water as well, as long as you're not on any blood thinners. So, again, we want to look at the structural aspects, and then we look at functionally. That's when we look at like your blood sugar, we look at your lipid panel, we look at your liver function. We look at, what else would we look at with the heart? We'd look at heart rate, pulse rate, CO2, anion gap, which is all in your CMP panel, like your basic kidney panel. So it's a lot of times it's not like the tests are very much the same, but in conventional medicine they're only trained to look for diseases. So when they look at your assessments, they're only looking for disease. So if you don't actually have diagnosed heart disease, they're going to say everything is fine. Whereas in our practice we see, oh, you know what, so there's, we need to lower the fat in the diet, we need to elevate the protein, we need to get more essential fatty acids into the system, we need to, maybe work on phase 1, phase 2, we maybe need carnitine in the system. We don't really know until we kind of get into it, because we're not thinking of it from a disease state. We're thinking of it, how can we give the heart support so that the heart doesn't develop disease? Because in our world, we look at, our bodies run based off of nutrition. So what we're eating, right? And then what we're breaking it down, what we're digesting and assimilating, meaning absorbing all the nutrients, and then eliminating waste, right? And so if we're not getting appropriate amounts of nutrition, right, then we're not breaking it down, right? So think if you're getting maybe 70% healthy diet, right, you're breaking that down, maybe you're only getting 50%, right, of those nutrients, and then whatever nutrient deficiencies are happening, that's going to affect. So like CoQ10, for instance, or omega-3s, or even zinc, or, various different nutrients that are magnesium, right? Minerals are really helpful for the heart. So if you have depleted minerals like magnesium, for instance, if you have, hey, how are you? If you have depleted magnesium, then it's going to put more pressure on the heart, because the heart's going to have to pump more. So, again, it's how we look at the body. We look at it from a structural perspective, anatomical, and then we look at it from a functional perspective in terms of, the muscles in the heart, in terms of the pumping of the heart, in terms of the blood, in terms of the viscosity, in terms of even peripherally, right? How is your blood flow and circulation, and how is that happening? Is your thyroid involved? Do you have kind of cold limbs and hands? Do you have Raynaud's? There's all kinds of different, do you have varicose veins? There's all kinds of circulatory challenges, that we have to look at, that again can be putting pressure on the heart. So it's not just focus just on the heart, but also on the full system and how it all works together as a team. So that's in holistic medicine. We look at the relationship that one organ system has to another, but we also look at the relationship to, like, let's say the environment has to your mental health and your emotional health, and then inevitably your physical health, right? So even when we're looking at the heart, even from a spiritual perspective, right, if we're carrying burdens, right, if we're carrying burdens from the past, carrying burdens, from regrets, sorrow, if we have a lack of forgiveness of self, if we have a distrust of self, if we have resentments of self, that can all kind of bog us down. And then also, too, if we've taken on a lot from other people, right, psychically, spiritually, and otherwise, right, and then ancestrally, right, matters of the heart, if we've taken on a lot of grief and suffrage from, let's say, genocide or slavery or any sort of atrocity, either short-term or long-term or both, doesn't really matter. It's just how your body and your mind and your spirit actually has processed it. And so, hello, how are you? Welcome in. And so again, looking at the heart and looking at how, functionally it's going to work, right? And then again, we use the human biofield as a diagnostic tool when we need to look at the heart, right? And so we have a wellness collective, which I'll be launching on Thursday for this month. It's all about holistic hypertension and holistic heart health. And so we'll be talking about it more, and we'll be talking about kind of the heart chakra and that giving and receiving dynamic. And I'll kind of show you some, biofield camera images, hopefully if I can find any, just on how, it looks when there is heaviness, in this chest area and in this heart and grief. We can also connect, using conscious communication. I give myself permission to feel my feelings, and that's okay. And then wherever we feel that, so if we feel it on the chest, we feel it on the heart, we know that's not only grief, it could be sadness, it could be sorrow, it could be suffering, it could be powerlessness, helplessness, hopelessness. There's all kinds of emotions that we can carry on our heart, right? And our heart, really that protective tool, again, keeping us, far away, as close or as far as we want to be. So again, a lot of internal pressure as well. If we are a good compartmentalizer and we avoid confrontation and we kind of tiptoe around, we're creating a bit of a pressure cooker. So there's a dual fold, right? There's the ones that are like letting it all hang out, blah, and then there's those that are, holding it all in because they don't want, to deal with conflict. But those two extremes rarely work. We've got to really get more, again, into our power, into our truth, into our voice, into our heart, because on the other side of our heart is our throat. So then we'll be able to express fully and completely, instead of shoving it down, food and otherwise, and also being able to digest how you feel. And so I know one of the things that when something happens, especially like shock or something like that, the tendency is hold your breath, right? Deplete yourself of oxygen. And so as you're depleting yourself of oxygen, unfortunately, you're putting more stress on your heart. So one of the things, I go with the flow, I digest how I feel, my heart is heavy but stronger every day, those kinds of mantras to really be able to, cleanse the heart and allow the heart. I know for me sometimes, I'm really sensitive, and so, I recognize that, the way people treat me has nothing to do with me. And so it's been hard as a healer, of course, because you get a lot, and so, you build muscle, you build, that Teflon skin, but boy, it's something getting there. So anywho, even with all of that, you recognize, where people are at in their process and their journey of self-healing and self-discovery, and you work with them if they're ready and willing. Obviously, if they're not ready and willing, there's nothing you can do, to help or convince. Stages of change, they have to be more in that contemplative state where they're thinking about it and searching for active guidance or active support. That's why it's incredibly important, if you are a healer or somebody that wants to, train, that you can't go around just prophetizing and helping the world. I know you want to, but it's actually not respectful. It's not reverent. We want to, if somebody asks, we can always offer. We can say, oh, do you want help? And if they say no or they don't respond, we can't, just now offer, right? That's not a healthy boundary. And even still, we have to be really mindful and respectful of allowing people to do their work. And that's really going to come up in this week in motivational interviewing, as we learn to, allow people to hold their space, right? And not make assumptions and not make judgments and not jump to conclusions, and really learn how to kind of take a step back and get more into that observation mode. So we have a jam-packed week. I do my morning flows Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. To 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's an hour just to start your day with intention and flow, so you can be mind, body, soul, and of course heart. And then this week I'm doing a holistic heart webinar on Thursday. I'll do it live stream just like I'm doing now, and then the replays will be available if you have registered for the class. If you haven't registered for the class, no replays, sorry. It'll be offline. And then if you're in my Intro to Holistic Medicine class, part 1 is on Wednesday. We're going to talk about bias, subjective data, motivational interviewing. And then on Saturday, we're going to go way deeper. We're going to have a questionnaire. It's divided all up. We're going to talk about all these different symptoms and break it all down, including the heart and various other aspects of energy and inflammation and digestion and gut health and all these different things, as we really start to put our health on the court and begin to look at our health a little bit differently, free from superiority bias and confirmation bias, and really so we're decolonizing our healthcare. Because I'm going to tell you, the data wasn't dataing. when I was going through things and I was learning, I learned that the data was not matching up with what I was seeing. And so, what am I going to do? Is my agency going to be to first, harm? Is that going to be my commitment? Or is my commitment going to be to abandon that, that oath, and then, be a shill for the system or whatever, And I just, for me, and I can only speak for me, I couldn't be complicit, I'm far too sensitive, honestly. So, yes, I mean, we all should know where our roles are in the revolution, and mine is definitely more in education and, more in a different spot. So, yes, so we have a jam-packed week. I really look forward to, getting to know you guys more. Oh, yeah. Oh, exactly. Yes, 100%. Everything cannot be picked up in checkups. They just can't. Again, we'll talk about that subjective data, because there's so many symptoms where I'm going to read off these symptoms and it's going to be so crazy. You're going to be like, what? All these symptoms are just related to nutrient deficiencies and not diseases. So even if you're having these and you're running to your doctor and you're running to the ER and you're going in 50 billion times and they're telling you, no, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong, and you're like, this is like a major medical gaslight situation, it's because you don't have a disease yet, you're not sick enough yet. So yay, good news, bad news. Good news, you're not sick enough. Bad news is you still have to figure it out. So hopefully this is a tool that'll begin to help you kind of begin to look at your body a little bit differently, be able to look at health a little bit differently. Again, health is a state, right? Nutrient deficiencies, accumulated toxins, overall organ health and function, and areas of prevention. I know I've spent the last 20-something years listening to people's frustration and unfortunately been the cleanup crew of medicine. So I unfortunately get all of the patients that have been harmed by this, who have been passed around, and normally I'm the last doctor that people see. I should be the first, but I'm the last, and they come to me and they're broke down and they're tired and they just have absolutely, yes, exactly, because the healthcare system is very much, it's a business, it's a profit center. And so when you bill insurance, I know people are like, holistic doctors bill insurance. No, I did that. It was like a pimp and hoe situation, and I wasn't the pimp, let me tell you. And so they were like demanding, you have a unit, you can only, see a patient for certain, for only certain things, and you've got to play the code games and pre-authorization games, and then they reject it, and then they go after your patients, and then they're ripping you off, and you're writing, hundreds of thousands of dollars off, and it's so inefficient, right? And you're also, a lot of times you're restricted to what they want you to do, which doesn't always make sense clinically. Why am I going to put this patient through? I mean, I understand, we want to rule things out, but why am I going to put this patient through all this other stuff just to be able to do this? So there's a lot of inefficiencies we know with the healthcare spending. 40% of the healthcare cost goes to admin. So, 40% of how much you're paying just goes to the suits, right? That doesn't cover any of your care. That's just the building and the suits, And so, 40% I think is just the suits, and then probably maybe the real estate. But I digress. Majority of it is not being for your delivered care, and so really, and thank you so much, Debbie. I actually have been doing this for the last 20 years, so I'm an instant success after 20 years. If you Google my name and look at, all of my accolades and accomplishments, I actually live what I teach about. So I live a holistic life. I've manifested really the life of my dreams, and continuing to, continue to create what I want, right? Because I just refuse. I absolutely refuse to, be told what to do, or, to live in a box, or to conform, or any of those things. I'm pretty eclectic, and I'm pretty just who I am, and I love myself, and I just want to share what I know and help people and help the world. And really, that was my only mission, even from a little girl. It's like always just wanting to help people and love people. And so with that, though, I've had to learn boundaries. I've had to learn, because when you are a generous soul, you do tend to give. And so again, if you've experienced pains, or you've experienced hurts, you don't want other people to go through it. You become deeply empathetic, but there's also a flip side where you have to learn balance too. So I love this duality, and we'll have a lot of fun teaching you guys all this week. I just wanted to jump on really quick for an hour and just kind of do a little mini talk about your heart and your heart health, and all the things related. We'll talk about stress, we'll talk about nutrition, we'll talk about sleep. We didn't even talk about the circadian rhythm, we didn't talk about the vagal nerve, we didn't talk about a lot of stuff. But on Thursday, we'll go through it kind of, top to bottom. We'll look at the conventional side, we'll look at the holistic side, we'll put it together integratively. I'll tell you guys what you can do step by step, so at least you can get started at whatever level you're at, so that you can really help yourself, save yourself, and you can heal. Because ultimately, again, nobody's going to come and save you. Absolutely. So yes, it just depends on how much questions. So my DMs are available, and I again am generous with my time, but there's a balance. So feel free to shoot me a couple DMs, no big deal. And yes, many doctors are very focused on finances and finances alone. I also offer a complimentary discovery call. The only reason I'm like, DMs, because sometimes my DMs get crazy. And so feel free, if it takes me like a day or two or whatever, or a couple hours, be okay. But I also offer a free discovery call too. So that way you can ask questions, and it can be more, secure with your information, because, social media networks are not that secure when it comes to your health information. So I have lots of secure portals and panels and all the things, because I own a health tech company. So anywho, well, if there is nothing else, let's see. Yeah, I know. There's so many of them. There's so many, like, oh my gosh, like, geez, like I've seen so much, or it's just a lot of ego. It's like, I'm the smartest kid in class. It's like, forget it. So anywho, thank you guys so much. I will also now go in and do all the events. I've got tons of work still I have to do this afternoon, so I'll get all that together. So like, share, subscribe, comment, all the things. I love you all. It's so great to see you again, and I'll be looking out for you guys in my communities, in our communities, together with holistic medicine. Together, we're going to revolutionize it.